PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here in the sports entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. We are here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. And, the Vegas Golden Knights, Winnipeg Jets, this is going to be a fantastic series. It's going to be one of the best first-round matchups that you are going to see out here. And, I just wanted to, take this episode of Vegas Hockey Hub and kind of talk about some players, some notable players that are going to be part of this playoff series. Now, I'm going to focus on a trio from Vegas, and I'm going to talk about two from the Winnipeg Jets. So the first one is going to be from the Vegas Golden Knights, and we're going to talk about the captain of the Vegas Golden Knights, a guy that's just coming back to the Vegas Golden Knights, and that would be Mark Stone, number 61. I mean, this is going to be a player that the Vegas Golden Knights are going to have to need in this playoff series. I mean, it's been a very notable shift when Mark Stone is on the ice versus when Mark Stone is not on the ice. There is a notable difference in terms of how the Golden Knights play, in terms of the chemistry of the lines, in terms of how Chandler Stevenson is going to play with Mark Stone on said third line for the Vegas Golden Knights. I also really want to mention the fact that when it comes to Mark Stone, his impact in terms of being a two-way player is noticeable. I mean, this is a guy that is one of the best defensive forwards in all of hockey. This is a guy who has been nominated time and time again, and a guy who's received votes time and time again when it comes to being one of the best, Selke Trophy in the NHL. I mean, he's been nominated multiple times. Now, when it comes to Mark Stone, I will say that he probably will be slow out of the gate. Okay, I'm not going to be surprised if it takes a while for Mark Stone to get back to the Mark Stone we all know. Because we've seen Mark Stone in the postseason before for Vegas. He can be clutch. We have seen Mark Stone perform as one of the best players in the NHL in the postseason when the Golden Knights need him to be. I also want to acknowledge the fact that Mark Stone being on the third line to start the postseason tells me all I need to know about what Vegas has moving forward. This is a Vegas Golden Knights team that's not going to force their injured captain to be on the top line right away. No, they're going to have him be on that line with Amadio, with Stevenson to start out the playoffs. I think it's a very smart move. I mean, keep in mind with Mark Stone what his stats were heading into the postseason. Keep in mind what he did in the regular season before getting injured for your Vegas Golden Knights. This is a guy who in 44 games had 17 goals, had around 40 points, and a plus 11 for the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, this is a guy in Mark Stone who really could make an argument, and we've made an argument here on Vegas Hockey Hub, that Mark Stone is the most valuable player on the Vegas Golden Knights. That Mark Stone, when he is on the ice versus when he's not on the ice, is one of the most important aspects of the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And yes, go Knights, go, absolutely. And as we are talking about 5 players to watch for the Vegas Golden Knights Winnipeg Jets playoff series here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And as we are doing our preview, Game 1, as the Vegas Golden Knights playing at T-Mobile Arena against the Winnipeg Jets, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. So Mark Stone is the number 1 player to watch. A guy who is coming back from injury, a captain of the Vegas Golden Knights. He is a valuable asset to what Vegas has to bring to Winnipeg. But he is not the only player that the Vegas Golden Knights are going to use in this series. He is not the only guy the Vegas Golden Knights are going to depend on to put the puck in the back of the net in this postseason. As a matter of fact, in this series, and I used him as the thumbnail, he is going to be not just one of the best players, but he might be the best player the Vegas Golden Knights have on their roster. And I'm talking about number 20, Chandler Stevenson. Not only is Chandler Stevenson the best trade in Vegas Golden Knights history, but this is a Chandler Stevenson that has been reliable. This has been a Chandler Stevenson who has been consistent, dependable. He is a player who the Vegas Golden Knights are going to have to rely on in this series against the Winnipeg Jets in order for Vegas to compete and beat Winnipeg. I mean, Chandler Stevenson being on the same line as Mark Stone should really be an indication of how much trust and how much confidence Bruce Cassidy and the Vegas Golden Knights have when it comes to Chandler Stevenson. I also want to acknowledge that Chandler Stevenson this season has arguably been one of the best producers the Vegas Golden Knights have had. I mean, his stats this season for the Vegas Golden Knights, he missed only one game all year, had 16 goals, 49 points, 65 points, and he had a plus 12. So he pretty much scored a point in 8 out of every 10 games, which is pretty impressive for a guy in the NHL. So for Chandler Stevenson, who, yes, will be a free agent, not this upcoming offseason, but the offseason next, this is going to be a valuable offseason for Chandler Stevenson. I mean, the 28-year-old, he won a Stanley Cup in Washington, gets traded over to Vegas, and has been a valuable asset to Vegas ever since. So Mark Stone is number 1. Chandler Stevenson is number 2. But the next guy and the last guy from the Vegas Golden Knights who we have to watch out for is a guy playing in his first ever playoff game tonight. That guy is the second overall pick from 2015, a guy who will always be compared to Connor McDavid, and that is Vegas Golden Knights superstar Jack Eichel. Look, Jack Eichel is a superstar. Jack Eichel is Vegas's superstar. And more importantly, they're going to have him play like a superstar against Winnipeg. They will have him play like a superstar against Connor McDavid. They're going to have him play like a superstar against Edmonton, against LA, against Colorado, against Minnesota. You know, regardless of who Vegas takes on in the second round, regardless of who they take on in the conference final, regardless of who they take on in the Stanley Cup, Jack Eichel has to be a valuable asset to Vegas. He has to be counted on here in Vegas because Jack Eichel is the best goal scorer the Vegas Golden Knights have. Jack Eichel is the biggest name the Vegas Golden Knights have. And more importantly, and I have to bring this up for an important reason, Jack Eichel is going to be the biggest threat to Winnipeg. Jack Eichel, when he's on the ice, when he is going to be on that first line alongside Jonathan Marchessault, alongside Ivan Barbashev, this is a guy who all eyes are going to be on the 26-year-old as he has his first ever appearance in the playoffs. And just to give you a friendly recap of what Jack Eichel did this season, in 67 games, he had 27 goals, 66 points, and a whopping plus 26. To say that Jack Eichel is not a valuable commodity to Vegas would be laughable. I mean, that plus 26, 66 points in 67 games, he pretty much, every time he played a game, he averaged a point. So Jack Eichel has done really well for Vegas. Jack Eichel has done his part in the regular season. Now it's his job in the postseason to see what he can do for Vegas. So as we are talking about 5 players to watch out for here in the Vegas Golden Knights Winnipeg Jets playoff series, and we are previewing Game 1 of Vegas versus Winnipeg here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. So we talked about Vegas. We mentioned Mark Stone. We mentioned Chandler Stevenson. And we mentioned Jack Eichel. Well, Winnipeg has some very valuable players as well. And even though these are not players I have on my list, they deserve honorable mention. Blake Wheeler has been a longtime veteran. He has been a stalwart of Winnipeg. Blake Wheeler is a leader in the locker room who Winnipeg relies on day in and day out. He might not be the same guy he was in Boston. Fair enough. He might not be the same guy he was a few years ago. But for a veteran leader like Blake Wheeler, he is one of the best veterans you could have in a locker room. So the Winnipeg Jets are going to have to rely on him in this series for Winnipeg. I also have to give an honorable shout out to Nikolai Ehlers as well. This is a guy who's done pretty well in the past, but someone who really has made an impact is Mark Scheifele. Mark Scheifele, 68 points on the year, 42 goals. He led a team in goals this year. So when it comes to Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois, you have Nino Niederreiter. Those are some solid names you have on the top six. But the bottom six isn't that bad either. Morgan Barron, the 24-year-old who they brought over, he's a guy that can get you about 20 points in the regular season, but it's his postseason possibility that could be good for them. Adam Lowry was drafted in the first ever NHL draft that the Winnipeg Jets had as a franchise. He is still here at 10 years later, and he has been a good member of that bottom six. I also want to mention Mason Appleton, the 27-year-old who went to Seattle and then went right back to Winnipeg. He is still on this team as well. But one defenseman that I do have to acknowledge, because he is not on my list, he's not the two players I'm going to talk about. But when it comes to Josh Morrissey, he is one of, if not one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Now, I'm not just talking about in Winnipeg. I'm talking about NHL. Josh Morrissey is one of the best. This is a guy who had 76 points in 78 games this year. And this is a guy who has really established himself as a top 10 defenseman in the NHL. And look, if you want to make an argument that Josh Morrissey is the best defenseman in this series, you can make a valid argument for it. Personally, I say it's Alex Pietrangelo, but you can make an argument for Josh Morrissey. And I will also mention Nate Schmidt as well, the former Vegas Golden Knight, the guy who is still a fan favorite here in Vegas. He is going to be in Winnipeg playing against Vegas tonight in Game 1. And he is still loved. He is still missed. Make no mistake about it. Nate Schmidt is going to always be a Vegas Golden Knight. He always appears in those charity games when they have the Raiders versus Golden Knights at the Las Vegas ballpark in the summer. Nate Schmidt's been there, and he is still a valuable member of that expansion team. So Nate Schmidt, unfortunately, going to have to play against Vegas tonight, but that's going to be okay because the Vegas Golden Knights are going to be able to take on the Winnipeg Jets, and they should be able to beat the Winnipeg Jets. But it'll be weird to see Nate Schmidt playing against Vegas in this series. Now, the two players I have to mention for Winnipeg. The first one is their leading scorer. That is number 81, Kyle Connor. Now, Kyle Connor, ever since he was taken in the first round of the 2015 NHL draft by the Winnipeg Jets. By the way, can I mention how the 2015 NHL draft keeps popping up here? Jack Eichel, second overall pick in 2015. Kyle Connor, 17th overall in 2015. One of the best quality drafts we've seen in the last decade. But Kyle Connor is an elite goal scorer. There is no doubt in my mind that Kyle Connor is going to have to help Winnipeg in this series. That they are going to have Kyle Connor produce at a mass level in order for Winnipeg to get the job done. His stats from 2022, 2023, the 26-year-old, 31 goals, 80 points on the year in 82 games. Once again, similar to Josh Morrissey, similar to Jack Eichel, averaging a near point per game this season. I also want to mention that him being a left shot, Kyle Connor has an advantage here. This is a Kyle Connor that I really think is going to make an impact for Winnipeg. And when it comes to offense, him, Dubois, Wheeler, there is going to be some good offense here in Winnipeg. Kyle Connor will be one of those guys. So as we're talking about 5 players to watch for the Vegas Golden Knights Winnipeg Jets playoff series here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. So the 3 players from Vegas that I mentioned earlier in the show, we have their captain, Mark Stone, their best center in Chandler Stevenson, and their superstar in Jack Eichel. In the Winnipeg Jets side, I mentioned Kyle Connor, and I have to mention their goaltender in Connor Hellebuyck. Connor Hellebuyck has arguably been a top 5 goalie in the NHL over the last 5 years. This is a Connor Hellebuyck who has undoubtedly been the life and blood of the Winnipeg Jets. This is a Connor Hellebuyck who over the last 4 or 5 years has been able to carry Winnipeg at times. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck, the last time that the Winnipeg Jets and Vegas Golden Knights faced off in the playoffs, it was Hellebuyck versus Fleury, and Marc-Andre Fleury won that series. So when it comes to Connor Hellebuyck, I have the utmost respect for him, but let me give you a reason why you have to watch out for him. Because Connor Hellebuyck is going to have to go up against one of the best offenses in the NHL in the Vegas Golden Knights. This is going to be a Connor Hellebuyck who's going to go up against at least 25 shots a night against Vegas. And we've all seen in the NHL, the more shots that you face, the higher percentage it is to have a goal be put up. I mean, there's a reason why you saw in the game last night that you had near 45 shots combined between both teams in just the regulation. I also want to mention that in the Edmonton and LA game, you had 2 goalies who refused to lose and were not willing to let up a goal. Minnesota versus Dallas was the same way. Jake Ottinger and Philippe Gustafsson. They both refused to let a goal up. So this is going to be a series where Connor Hellebuyck is going to have to try his absolute hardest to not let Jack Eichel let in a goal. This is where he's going to have to put all of his effort into Mark Stone, Chandler Stevenson, Jack Eichel, into them not having a goal put up against those guys. So when it comes to Connor Hellebuyck, when it comes to Kyle Connor, those are going to be the 2 players the Winnipeg Jets are going to have to rely on against Vegas. Whereas Vegas is going to have to count on Jack Eichel, Chandler Stevenson, and Mark Stone in order to beat Winnipeg. Now this is going to be something we are going to do here on Vegas Hockey Hub. I will be giving out my prediction for each game heading into it. So if it being the Game 1 preview here on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media, I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. This is going to be a game at T-Mobile Arena here in Las Vegas. So the Vegas Golden Knights should have the home field advantage here. They're going to have an amazing presentation. They're going to have some very stellar performances here in Vegas. We're the entertainment capital of the world. But my overall prediction in terms of the score for Vegas and Winnipeg, I say that it is going to be a 3-2 game. I think that the Winnipeg Jets will have 2 goals. The Winnipeg Jets will let up 3 goals, and the Vegas Golden Knights will win this game 3-2 against Winnipeg. And if I had to predict who I have scoring goals tonight, I'm going to say Jonathan Marchessault could be one of them. I'm going to say Phil Kessel. He has a possibility of getting one. And since he's coming back, and it's going to be his first game with the Vegas Golden Knights, or since being injured, I will say Mark Stone is a possibility as well. Now, some honorable mentions, of course, will go to players like William Karlsson, Riley Smith. There's even a possibility of seeing someone like Michael Amadio, for example, potentially getting a goal. But if I had to pick my 3 goal scorers for tonight, I am going to say Jonathan Marchessault would be one. Mark Stone will be my second. And then I will have be my third. So when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, that is going to be my prediction for tonight. The Golden Knights will win 3-2 against Winnipeg. Now, I want to know from everybody watching this video, who do you have winning this game? Do you have Vegas? Do you have Winnipeg? Who is your prediction? What's your score prediction for tonight? Because the Vegas Golden Knights and Winnipeg Jets is going to be by far a very entertaining game. And your host, Ian Raquelli, has it being a 3-2 result in favor of Vegas. Now, since this is talking about the NHL playoffs and we're talking about the Stanley Cup playoffs, let's do a quick recap on the rest of the NHL as of right now. So the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, you had the Boston Bruins beating the Florida Panthers. They ended up beating Florida 3-1. It was a very good game. It was actually a lot more back and forth than I expected it to be, but Boston put Florida away and they won the game 3-1. I also have to mention the Carolina and New York Islanders game. This was a Carolina and New York game that's very defense heavy. You're going to see not a lot of high scoring affairs in Carolina and New York. Carolina won game 1, 2-1 in game 1. Then you had the two slugfests, the two games that ended up being 4.5 hours long, and that was the Dallas Stars and Minnesota Wild and the Edmonton Oilers and LA Kings. The Edmonton Oilers and LA Kings ended up being a 4-3 game in overtime. Adrian Kempe ended up scoring the game-winning goal, having his second goal of the game, going up against Pat Stewart Skinner to pick up the victory for LA. And for Minnesota and Dallas, you had a Minnesota Wild team who scored a very good goal, might I add. And you had the Minnesota Wild picking up the victory 3-2 against Dallas, and not just one, but two overtimes in this game. And then you had the recent games where you had the New York Rangers. They beat the New Jersey Devils 5-1 in this game. You had the New Jersey Devils. Unfortunately, their goaltending got cooked by the New York Rangers. And Vladimir Tarasenko having his first postseason goal as a Ranger. So I will say props to him. Chris Kreider had a 2-goal performance. Very well done for the New York Rangers. I also want to mention the Tampa Bay Lightning and their absolute embarrassment to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Tampa Bay beat Toronto 7-3, and it was a very pleasant game to watch. The Tampa Bay Lightning basically took everyone who took Toronto and made a laughingstock of them. I mean, if the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to perform like this, no wonder they haven't won a playoff series since 2004. And obviously, you're going to have right now the Seattle Kraken and Colorado Avalanche, and right now you have the Vegas Golden Knights and Winnipeg Jets. So this was an episode of PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Raquelli. So for this playoff series here on PR Connections Radio, your host, Ian Raquelli, will be doing this all playoff long. I will be doing a preview show a half hour before the game, and I will be doing a half-hour recap show right after the game ends. So I'll be doing this for Game 1, Game 2, Game 3, and Game 4, and if necessary, Game 5, 6, and 7. So PR Connections Radio is happy to announce that Vegas Hockey Hub will be providing you coverage of the Vegas Golden Knights playoff series against the Winnipeg Jets all week long and all game long here on Vegas Hockey Hub, here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. So this was our Game 1 preview here on Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Raquelli. Follow me on social media at Ian Raquelli18 and follow the show at Vegas Hockey Hub. And until next time, continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.